Right, so now it's time for reassembly. I've already assembled the trigger back inside here as such, getting ready for all the other fun parts. Just bear with me and we'll be on our way. Okay, so with your trigger pushed back, you're going to want to grab this pawl spring and detent pin, push it in right there. Don't push it in too far, you don't want it to go flying out. And then next you're going to want to grab this, the pawl. You're going to want to insert it in the hole, and then while you do that, make sure not to launch that across the room. You grab a small pin or a small punch, or your finger, or whatever works best to kind of push that in. If you've ever done any gunsmithing projects before, you know how fun detent springs can be. Kind of need 4 or 5 arms there to do it. So that's in. You're going to want to make sure that you get it down inside the trigger housing in there. That way it doesn't fly right back out. I'll be back with you in just a sec. So after you've flung your detent pin across the room 8 or 9 times, learn swear words you didn't know that you knew, it's time to put the transfer bar in. And you just gonna drop it right on in there. Super simple. Keep tension on that pawl. Put a little bit of pressure on the trigger. If you accidentally pull the trigger too much, just go ahead and put that pawl back into place. It's alright, just be slow, take your time. Okay, now we'll be doing the trigger return spring, getting that back in place with all the fun that entails. So you want to get your parts. So you want to get the plunger, right, that goes on the tip of the lever on the trigger. You want to get your spring, your new spring from Wolf. This is an 8-pound spring, right? And then you need your pin capture right here. Okay? So you want to make sure that you line that up with the end of that lever. Put it in there, and I'm going to go ahead and line the inside of that with some CLP, because it is going to have friction, and you always want to use proper lubrication. You could even use something like white lithium grease, especially for an application like this where it's going to be in there for a long time. Okay. Okay, so we went ahead and we lubricated that with some CLP. We grabbed our 8-pound trigger return spring from Brownells. Went ahead and inserted it in. Next, you need to make sure that you install the pin catch facing up, just like that, because that's what's going to catch the pin right there, that notch. I'm going to go ahead and put the pin in, and we'll be back in just a second. That one has a lot less tension. You can just push it in by hand, and then follow up by making sure you have it flush with your punch. And then you have this assembly put back together, all shined up and beautiful and ready to go. Now another thing you may want to do here is go ahead and take some of that carbon destroyer or whatever you got and go ahead and clean the inside of your frame, because goodness knows when the last time the inside of your frame was cleaned and you got all kinds of gunpowder in there. Hell, this thing has quite a bit of buildup in here. Like I said, this serial number says it was produced in 2011. Here it is, 2019, and just barely getting a trigger job. It was a safe queen for the most part. She sat in a safe, never really abused too much. The fellow just didn't care for the trigger pull on it. And going through this, I can totally understand why. It's a horrendous trigger pull, but it won't be anymore. So the next part is going to be actually putting this back together. So make sure you get it located here on the back. Just takes the proper lining up and everything. It'll all fall into place. We'll get it up in here and we'll be back with you shortly. So if you're having trouble and you can't manage to get it up in there, do yourself a favor, use some lubrication. It'll make it slide right on in. Next is going to be the hammer. You want to take some of your CLP, lubricate the hammer dog. You're going to want to put it down in here, right? Just like this. A little bit harder with the hammerless model. You want to make sure it's lined up and give the trigger, pull the trigger about halfway. Make sure you get the sear locked in there. I didn't think I did, but it looks like I went ahead and got that in place. So then we want to go ahead and install the trigger pivot pin. Get it all lined up in there the correct way, and it'll just slide right on in. Then just like that, go ahead and check the timing. Everything locks up, everything looks good. We're going to have to go ahead and then assemble the rest of the hammer. So let's go ahead and get with that. So it's just going to be the reverse of what you've already done. You want to make sure that the slant is pointed forward towards the barrel. Then you're going to compress the spring and shove your safety pin through there and reinstall it into the grip. Alright, I'll be back. I'm going to do a follow-up video and polish up the gun.